Hi everybody, welcome to our CakeFu Master Series. We are really happy to be here today, and I'm glad that you guys are all here with us. I know that we bring these trainings to you, and it's a lot of fun, and it's been so fun to see all of the excitement that comes from CakeFu. And I know last week we had our 50th training, so this is 51. So this is just so cool. Yeah. So I said last week, thank you, but thanks again, you guys. You guys are awesome. Okay, so to get started, I wanted to introduce our trainer today. We have Elisa Strauss. She is super talented, super fun, super cute. So welcome, Elisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. We will. I wanted to let you guys know again before we get started. There's the chat box on the right. Go ahead and chat amongst yourselves over there. If you have any technical questions, you can ask them there. Down below here is an Ask a Question box. That's where you're going to ask all of your questions to Elisa throughout the training. So make sure that you ask your questions, because that's why, that's what we're here for. That's why it's live. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So Elisa, we're going to talk about you a little bit, where you're from, where you've come from, where you're going, how you got here, all of that. So yeah, okay. So were you born in New York?
I have, yes. As my brother likes to tell me, my older brother, I was born in the Bronx, New York, which you may know is famous for the Bronx Zoo. So for many years, I was born in the zoo. But no, I primarily grew up in a suburb of New York, and then I went to college just north of New York City at Vassar College, and then I went to pastry school in New York City. So it's kind of funny because I don't really think of myself as a New Yorker, but I really am.
That all sounds like it to me.
I can't deny it. And now I'm in Manhattan of New York City, and I had a cake shop for over a decade, if I could say that.
Wow.
And it was a duplex and a real commercial kitchen and studio and workspace. And then actually after having my two kids, two young ones, I actually just work out of a studio now where I primarily teach, and I teach at the culinary schools, and obviously I'm teaching on Craftsy, which has been fun, and I'm going later on this year to Canada to teach, so I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I'm not centered in my one bakery space.
That's really, really awesome. So, okay, so when you started out, you actually didn't, you went to Vassar, and you weren't doing pastry then, or culinary then.
No.
What was your major?
Right, no, I was an art major, studio art, so that comprised of a lot of, art history, but a lot of painting, drawing, sculpture, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of other liberal arts classes from, anthropology and psychology and all that kind of stuff. And then I did do one semester, we say abroad, but it was in Chicago at the Art Institute, and that was amazing because this all relates to cake because I took fiber arts and textile design and color, which I think is the best class any cake designer can take. Anything with color theory is amazing. So, and then I finished up at Vassar, and I always had a love of baking. With my grandma, when I was a little girl, she made tons of cookies, and, I always loved baking anything, and so that all kind of came together after college, because even though I was working in fashion, I was a textile designer, it all dealt with design and color and running a business, which is really what I do. So it all just came together in Confetti Cakes.
That's really awesome. That's super cool. So when you learned how to do cake decorating, I know that I've heard a lot of people say that culinary school is really good for teaching you, the basics and the science behind baking, things like that, but not a lot of decorating. So
absolutely, I would say, yeah. Go ahead.
Where did you get your base for decorating? Did you just, trial
Yeah,
and error? Did
well,
you take classes?
yeah, two things. So I definitely, always just love to bake, and I always love to draw. So, the art end of it always, I think, is probably more important. I mean, if you think of, there are many cake designers out there that never went to pastry school. To I believe Sylvia Weinstock never went either, but they're known in the field, and it's just Colette was a designer as well, and so when people ask me, do I need to go to culinary school, my first answer is no, you don't need to go, but I do think if you can go, it's great because of a few reasons. One is it exposes you to the industry. When you're home just working on cakes, all you know is what you know, and you're not learning from anyone else or their experience. It also gives you the tools, just like a liberal arts college education. It may not teach you a vocation, but it teaches you how to think and speak. So pastry school for me did that. I feel confident that I can look at any recipe, even if I've never made it before, and I know what they're talking about, how to convert measurements and all that kind of stuff. So, pastry school's really good. Plus, I have to say, I love going to my pastry school because it has such a great alumni network. So, when I was starting out and opening my commercial space and I wasn't sure about health regulations or, just different people to talk to. So that's a reason to go. A cake designer, do you really need to go? No, absolutely not. And in fact, before I went to pastry school, I even had my own website. So I had already started doing cakes for people, and I had also taken just a few classes in the city at a place called the New School. And that was just taught by a woman who's, a pretty well-known cake designer in New York City that taught me how to make sugar flours and just talked about the process.
Awesome. Well, cool.
And I have to say that one of the best tools that has taught me about cake decorating has just been reading other cake books, cake decorating books. I just love it. And, even though we have social media now and, the world is a lot closer, there's nothing that I like better than looking at someone else's, cake decorating book and seeing how they do things and how they approach things. And I've taught myself a lot just by looking at other people's work.
Yeah. Well, books are really good because you know that someone has spent a lot of time getting it just right.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, and you have written a couple of books. You want to talk about the books that you have?
Sure. I did two books. One was the Confetti Cakes Cookbook, which kind of was a general overview of my bakery and some recipes. And, it has cookies, cupcakes, mini cakes, and sculpted cakes. And each chapter goes from easiest to hardest because one of the things that's been so difficult is being able to reach the amount of people I wanted to reach. Like whether I was featured on a morning show or the Food Network, people wanted a piece of confetti cakes, and I'm not able to go everywhere, I should say, anywhere. But it's like Freudian slip with little children. I'm not able to go everywhere, and so this was a nice way to be able to share our recipes that people loved, and also someone who's just starting out, it can teach you the basics of how to make a sugar cookie, or someone who wanted to make a sculpted sushi platter, it gives them that. So that was the first book. And then the second book, which I think the title kind of confuses people, it's Confetti Cakes for Kids. But it's not for kids to make the cakes. It's, although my 3.5-year-old loves to help me in the kitchen.
They always do.
Yes, not as neat as I would like her to be, but I have to remember she's 3. But yeah, and so that's more like kid themes, which I have to say I've done so many birthday cakes for 30-year-olds that have, strawberry shortcake or glowworms or things that really my child wouldn't even know about. So, and that too, I love that book, especially because it's the second book. So anytime you do anything, it's like making a recipe for the second time. You're even that much better.
Yeah.
And Amelia, what you start to say is like, you pour your heart and soul into these books, you go over them. I mean, I don't think the average person realizes, aside from the recipe testing, how much work goes into books, and just, you know, the editing and the, you know, the thought process, and making sure that no matter what your skill level is, that you can make it.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I know that, you know, a lot of people put a lot of work into, you know, their websites, their videos, their blogs. I mean, I know I do. But, you know, but a book that's published, you know, you have to go through it over and over and over and over again just to make sure that it's perfect. So
yeah, and you know, and it lives on forever. I mean, in our first book, we did all the recipes, we tested all the recipes, and then the printer, you know, changed one of the amounts of flour. So then we had, you know, in the first printing, the wrong flour amount, which, you know, if you have a recipe and that's one of the 5 ingredients, the sugar cookie, right? So I had a lot of people, you know, calling me and emailing me, and I felt awful. And then, you know, luckily the book has been now, I think it's in its 6th or 7th printing. Nice. Which is so nice, but, you know, luckily it's corrected. So whenever anyone calls me, I say, well, which printing do you have? Because
you have the first edition. That's funny. All right. Well, and you have 2 little ones, right?
Yeah.
So how do I know that there are a lot of moms out there listening right now. So how do you do it with your kids and still maintain an actual physical shop? Because I know that there are a lot of moms that would like to do that, but, you know, how do you do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I don't do it. I mean, I have you know, my studio space, but I don't have a retail shop. That to me is just so scary, because that's, you know, you have accountability 24/7. But, you know, since the girls I have 2 girls, and they, you know, they come first. You know, I didn't have children so that someone else can raise them. That said, though, I have so much help. I mean, I have a babysitter that comes in, and my parents come, and, you know, my husband, when I fly to Craftsy and shoot videos for a week so that they can be, you know, brought to other people. You know, my mother-in-law flies in from the West Coast to New York. So really, I mean, it's such a, I guess, traditional answer, but it's really, you know, it takes a village, and the fact that we have the support from all of our family, and, you know, being able to be in my daughter's lives, and, you know, being able to walk them to school, but then also being able to run home and have a conference call with you about this. So, you know, and also a lot of nights I work, you know, as soon as the girls go to bed, which of course is always later than I want it to be, you know, I'm back working, you know, whether it's answering emails or with the Craftsy classes. One of the things I love about it is after you buy the class, you own it for life. So as a mom, I watch Craftsy classes because, you know, you can watch it whenever you want, wherever you want. And that's also my time. I usually, if anyone's written to me, they know I usually get back to them at night or first thing in the morning, because I answer all my students' questions, which is really nice. So, you know, I think it's such a cliche, right? Like, nothing's ever perfect, and you know, we're all just juggling a lot of balls.
Yes, I totally understand that and get that, and I agree with the village thing, because I know I've had my mom come and watch my kids plenty of times because of, you know, the same thing, going to, you know, teach a class or judge a competition, or, you know, all of that. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and get right into the meat of things. We are going to talk about, this is actually your Craftsy video that has just come out, right?
Oh,
your video. So yeah, we've got, you're actually going to talk about this is like your signature thing. I think you have a video out on YouTube that has you making a
Yeah.
dog cake, and I don't know of any cake decorator that has not seen that. If you
Oh,
haven't seen it, go
yeah.
find it because
It's so much fun. Yeah, you know, it started as my dad, which we always joke. It's his favorite child, his dog, Joey. And for his 60th birthday, I could not think of anything else that would be better to make. So at the time, I thought, oh, let me make the cake, but also let me videotape it. So we videotaped it. This is back in my old bakery space. And then I had a friend who edited it down for me. And it was, I mean, I had no idea how, but yeah, now it's kind of weird because on my channel it has over 2 million hits, but on another person's channel it has almost 3 million hits.
oh
So
wow.
yeah, a lot of people have watched it. And so it's kind of nice because from that, then, you know, taking this course, I've had so many questions over the years. How do you actually make it? So it's really nice. And also the difference is, you know, now obviously I've gotten better, right? Because it's a few years later. And also being able for people to customize their dog. So whether you have a husky or a chihuahua or a Dalmatian, you know, we talk about that in the Craftsy class, how to make, you know, because people really love their animals. And I was also saying it's, you know, teaching the dog is great, but as any cake decorator knows, you always want to build on your knowledge. So I had a student come from England just 2 weeks before I shot the Craftsy video. She wanted to make Cookie Monster. So I was using the same fur silicone mat that I used on the dog, and I couldn't believe, you know, the old me would have used a scalpel and cut every little hair. But so now I realize other ways that I can use my tools.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, and so we're going to go through the process of making this dog. Of course, it's in more detail and a lot more information on Craftsy, but this is, you know, this is how you do it. And so, okay, so here we go. This is the start of it, and you know what, I will just let you talk through it. And
okay, sure. I mean, people always ask because, you know, what I do is usually considered realism, and so no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm doing a dog, a handbag, a, you know, Pinocchio, I usually start with blocks of cake. So I always compare it to like an ice sculpture. So here are just the, you know, I have the base that's cut out, and on the Craftsy platform, you get the template of the exact shape of a dog's base, you know, the dog I did anyway, and it teaches you how. But here, so you'll see the first kind of tier, because, you know, when you look at a wedding cake, you have tiers, and they usually are graduated like that. So now we have to think about, you know, tiers within the cake and doweling inside the cake, all these special techniques. So this is kind of the first tier, and if you see, I did it at a little angle just to start the curvature of the spine.
okay, perfect. And I see down at the bottom you've got your foam core.
Yeah, foam
and
core.
Is it already cut to the shape that the base will be? Okay.
Yeah, early on in my career, I used to, you know, start the cake on a board, and then after I sculpted the cake, then I would cut the board, and it just made a mess. So now I'm just much better about planning.
Good. Awesome. Okay, let's go on with. So after you've got all of your cakes stacked and doweled, make sure that you've got really good support in there, right?
Yes, yep, and I show how to dowel it and put separator board. And the most important thing I'd say is so many students come to me and they say, oh, my cake was wobbling while I was carving it. And it's so funny because to me it's like, you know, a no-brainer, and it's one of those things like I do every day, but freeze the cake. You stack the cake and then you freeze it before you carve it. You know, you wouldn't try to carve an ice sculpture or a block of ice while it was melting. It's the same thing here. Remember, you want your cake to be moist. You want your buttercream to be delicious. So all of those things should be soft when people eat them, but while you're carving them, you want to work with them cold.
Yes, very, very good. It really is next to impossible to do something if it's really, you know, make sure you've got enough refrigerator or freezer space, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, or
as
freeze
cold as you
it.
can get.
Yeah, you could freeze it in portions, like
That's
those
true. That's
pears,
true.
and then put it together, and then, you have to work quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I find that if I'm not working quickly enough, just throw it back in and
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
come back later.
Yeah, and so here for the dog, I actually carve the body separately, and here's the head. I always say it looks kind of like a skull or Darth Vader,
It
but
does.
so the body's on a separate board, and then the head's on a separate board, and then after they're covered in the fondant, I bring it all back together.
Okay, cool. And so I'm sure that you have probably on your Craftsy video different ways to shape the face. Is there a difference in the face, or is it all just pretty standard?
No, of course, if you have a Chihuahua, I would say, it's probably more like a heart shaped, like almost more like a triangle, or an upside down triangle. It's really about looking at each dog and, figuring out the shape. If you're doing a husky, then you may want to elongate the nose a little bit, or, a Great Dane, something like that. And that would just be the board. Again, I give the templates to the board on the head, but you could definitely make differences throughout. So yeah.
All right. Was it a challenge coming up with templates and things like that for something that's, sculpted in three-dimensional? I can imagine that would have been a little tough to come up with a way to teach that.
I think in the olden days, I used to make things so difficult for myself. I would, sketch it out, and then I would, hold it up, and then start carving, and then say, oh, say that's not right. But now it's so nice with all these computers and things, and not really computers. I'm so old-fashioned, and, my husband would laugh at me and my brother to hear me talk about computers because I'm so not good with it. But really just taking a photograph of whatever you want to do, whether it's a dog, and now with Google, images, you can get anything. I mean, if a client comes to me and they want me to create a character, I'm able to get, usually 360 degrees of whatever it is I want. And then I take that just to a copy store, whether it's Staples or the local copy guy, and then I just blow it up to the size that I want. So using the templates is great, and then the kind of like the base templates, I'm just always looking at the cake from an aerial view.
All right. So you probably get just shots of, different angles of the project.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that helps.
Well, it's nice too, because the comments that came from my Craftsy students have just been that it's so nice being taught how to make this template and then being able to make anything, whether it was, in my handbag class or the dog. I hate for people to feel like when I'm teaching one thing.
One thing.
I always like to be like, here, I'm teaching you how to make a dog, but this will teach you how to make a cat, a lion, any dog, a Cookie Monster, that it should be giving you the tools and techniques to make any cake you want.
Awesome. That's what we need to do, because we are custom, right? And so to be able to take something from, this dog to something totally different, and be able to change it according to what people are asking for, that's really important, because we're not all going to be doing the same exact thing ever.
That's right.
All right, so this is showing different ways of doing fur. Is that?
Yes, doing different fur. Just using, first I use, usually I use an impression mat. So whether it's, something with straight hair or curly hair or long fur, short fur, or pebbly skin, something that looks almost like Goosebumps for the hairless, crested dog. And then my mom's always loved Sharpei dogs. Like making wrinkles and things like that. So that was a lot of fun playing with, the different dusts and paints and textures and things like that.
So do you have a texture mat for each of these different types? Do you have multiple texture mats?
I do, although, you know, depending on what I'm doing, I mean, sometimes it's just using something like drawer liner that I have laying around the house, or I have, you know, for the fur, I have one now that was so helpful. Otherwise, again, I'm using my hand to make every little hair because, of course, it has to look perfect. So, yeah, I have different mats for that, for the long hair, short hair, for the goosebumps. And what's so nice about them is that they work for so many other things. You know, like someone was asking me in the handbag class, they wanted to make kind of like a zebra print. Well, if you wanted to look like zebra or pony or some sort of animal, you could use that same fur mat for that. Or, you know, if 2-year-olds love Elmo and they want an Elmo cake, just like the Cookie Monster, you can use it for that versus, you know, everyone can do the piping with either the grass tip or, you know, just pulling it out, which, you know, it looks cute and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to make it out of fondant and you want it to really look real, whether it's like a little teddy bear cookie or, you know, life-size Elmo, then I think, you know, the silicone mats really do the best job.
Awesome. Okay, and I know that we're going to get a lot of questions in here about where do you get these silicone mats?
Okay, well, the company that makes them is Marvelous Molds.
Okay.
Marlon, I could, you know, send the link to anyone. I think I have it on my Facebook page. I put it. And the Dominic is amazing. He's the one he's taught so many people how to make your own molds. That's, I think, the parent company. And now he's gone ahead and worked with different designers for lace molds and, you know, these kinds of things. Button molds, jewel molds. He uses things for isomalt. So chocolate, you could, I mean, that's the nice thing about the silicone. Like, you know, in this, with the dogs anyway, I'm making legs. And so I could wrap the silicone around the legs, whereas when you know, have a hard mat, like I've had, you know, those plastic mats before, you can't wrap it around anything. So working, you know, on a curved surface like a basketball, these are much better.
Cool. So when you put on your texture, I think we're going to show some pictures of that.
Okay.
So here's your dog, and you're wrapping the fondant around.
Well, this is a great technique. Anyone that's done a more vertical cake knows that, you know, if you're covering a beer bottle, you're not going over the top of the cake. Aside from it being too tall, you're going to crush, you know, the top, especially if you're making it all out of cake. And I first started using this technique. I remember there was an art collector who had a lot of Andy Warhol prints of Campbell's soup cans. So I had to make these huge soup cans, one at each end of the buffet for his, you know, birthday party. And so I started, you know, wrapping the fondant around the cake versus over the top. And now it's just come in such handy, you know, because it's not the same. Like in the handbag, I piece it because it's clear, it's like a box. But on a dog, you don't want to piece it. So this is a really great technique for doing anything that's super vertical.
Very cool. So when you do this, do you find that there are seams when you get to the end? Is it the brand of fondant that you use that helps that, or is there a technique that you do to blend it in really well? What do you do to get the seams?
Well, two things. For this dog cake, and actually for the handbag too, I have just started using Fonderific, which I have to say I was really pleasantly surprised. I had never used it before. I started doing it, but for these types of cakes where I want the seams to be gone, it's been really great. I've used all sorts of different fondants, and I use different gum paste and stuff like that. But so I do think part of it is the Fonderific, and then also just the technique I show, which is really just keeping my knife beveled when I cut it, and then pushing the silicone mat back over the seam. I think it's really important when people have seams that they either embrace it. So if you're doing a wedding dress or a handbag where you want the seam to come together, you know, make the seam and make it look like you're creating a seam. So make it perfect, add stitching, put in buttons. But if you're doing something more organic, like a mountain or a dog, and you want to hide it, then don't make a seam straight down the animal, let's say. Try to do it on a curve, kind of like the motion of the fur. And then you'll see, I think I sent you a picture of the back of the dog.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can really see the seam, right?
I didn't notice the seam, so.
Yeah, well now, of course, now
we'll be looking.
100 emails, I see the seam! It's like my daughter saying, so anyway. But anyway, well, hopefully you don't see the seam.
I'm sure that we won't.
And if you do, it's fur, so you can always add a little bit more to cover it over. So
there you go. There you go. Well, those are really great tips of, making it, more organic and not straight lines. And the Fonderific is a really great fondant. I have used it, and it is wonderful stuff. So
yeah, and it tastes good too.
It does. It's really yummy. Yeah, I love their different flavors too. I like that. Yeah. So okay, so this is the head.
Yeah, and so one thing I didn't say before, but I always say, in all the sculpting courses to all my students, is you always want to carve deeper than you think you'll need. And the example I always give is with a golf course. So, if you're making little divots and you make a little divot, once the buttercream goes on and the rolled fondant, you're not going to see much of a divot or a sand trap or, a watering hole. So, and the same thing goes if you notice how deep the eyes were carved and how deep the snout and the mouth were carved. That was all very intentional, because remember, you always have to go back over it with the buttercream and the fondant. And so if you want those impressions, whether you're doing a shirt or a suitcase where you want to show a pleat or something else, just always carve more than you think.
Awesome. Well, okay, so I can see the lines and everything, the texturing. This is the texturing mat that you've used for this?
Yeah, and so in both this and also the handbag, I use an alligator mat, which is really cool, or I have an ostrich mat, whatever texture I want to do. I actually emboss it first before I put the fondant on, and then I can always go back again because it's silicone. I have one here, so So since it's silicone, I can, just take a corner of it and let's say go in the snout or go in, behind the neck or whatever it is. So it's really nice being able to just manipulate it that way.
That's really awesome. I really like that mat, because I've done a dog before, and yes, I watched your video before I did it.
Let's see. You have to show.
Oh, I don't have a picture of it right now.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was it was really time consuming to mark all that fur in there. It took a long time.
Well, and even the monster cake that I did, it's on the cover of my kids' book. I mean, I would never do that again. Now that I have the mat, I just don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. But we keep growing, and some of my students are always embarrassed to do that. I said, I'm not showing you my cakes from 20 years ago when I first started. So, we evolve, and that's the point of it. I consider myself still a student, constantly learning. So, When you think you know everything, that's a sad state of affairs.
Yes, that means that you don't know everything. If you think you know everything, you absolutely don't.
I always say the older I get, the more I realize what I don't know.
Yeah, that is so true. So true. Okay, so then we have, let's see. And here you're putting it all together.
Oh yeah, so I doweled the head to the body, and then I did put some fur around the neck to seam it, and then there are so many ways you could hide, you know, the seam if you didn't want to go back in and put more fur or anything. You know, so I do a collar. You could also do a bandana, or, you know, a big gorgeous flower, or a wreath, or some, you know, there's a big bow. There are just so many ways you could hide seams if you wanted to. But in this one, I actually go ahead and put a dog tag with the dog's name, and I show how to do the lettering and everything, like to make it look embossed like a real metal dog tag. So yeah, but yeah, that's me just, you know, making the nails and I guess putting the legs on and all that stuff.
Okay. Do you feel like you need to come in with like a Dresden tool and add more texture to the fur, or does that mold do it all for you?
I think I mean, it definitely can do it all, especially if you think of, I mean, it's not my style and nothing against it, but a lot of people will just cover a cake in fondant, even if it is like an organic cake, like a dog, and they'll airbrush it, and that looks cool. It just looks cartoonish. So, you know, if you did nothing and you don't have the mat, it will still read as dog. It will just read as a cartoon character dog, you know, like Garfield or something. But if you wanted to, then I think the fur mat is your best bet. And then I usually use the tool, you know, again, to make kind of like the impressions of the paws, or, you know, to get a little deeper into the eyes, things like that. And then wherever I seam it together, I usually do press the mat in first, so it has like this general coating of the fur, and that the fur is going in the same direction. And then I may just go back in with the tool.
Awesome. Okay.
And it's just a simple, you know, a veining tool, or yeah, and there you see the collar. For the collar there, I used just some drawer liner to create like a waffly woven texture.
Oh, that's really cool.
I mean, and again, it's just a little detail, but I didn't even dust it. I don't even know if I put stitching. I think I put a little. I always put stitching, but
well, anything that's textile, you know, you want the stitching in there.
Yeah, I can't help myself. And there, I think I'm just showing how I curl the back of it, and then I go ahead and put a D-ring and things like that. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And you can see the details in the mouth and everything, and how deep that had to be in order to get the tongue in there and all that.
Yeah, I just love, I add the tongue. Most of my dogs have their mouths open, honestly, because it just adds an extra color. You know, I mean, a whole dog is usually one color or two-tone or three-tone, but then you just need a pop of something around there. So the eyes are usually black and brown and white. Everything's always black, brown, and white. So I just usually add the tongue for some color.
I love it. Well, and it looks so much more realistic to see their little tongue, because, you know, dogs are always, you know, sticking their tongues out.
They cool, right? They pant, they cool themselves that way.
Exactly, exactly. I love this. And his little nose, the snout. That's very well done.
You know, I go back in with some dust and stuff like that, and I left the chest white. You know, you can go crazy all over, but I only had a week.
So do you just dust the fur, or do you airbrush and dust, or do you what do you do there?
You know, I'm not a huge airbrush person. I've used the airbrush on occasion, and usually I'm using it when I'm doing really huge projects. So, you know, like the Food Network Extreme Cake, when I had a 6-foot-tall sock monkey. Okay, I had time restraints and I had large surface area to cover. So for that, I use the airbrush. But I really like the subtlety of dust. I feel like that, you know, if you're going to look at a real dog's fur, you know, within a 2-inch block, you may see 3 different shades of the fur, you know, the darkness, and you can really get that with dust. So I do that. I don't seal it in. Some people have been asking me, do I
steam it
or you know, do anything to seal it? I don't, but you could.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and then let's see. This is your finished
Oh
dog
yeah,
right
there's the
here.
doggy. Yay! Yeah.
Awesome. And you can see where you've added, darker and,
Yeah.
and not added some color so that, it adds that, real dimension and
The
everything.
depth, yeah, like even if you look at like the neck, which is usually, if you even don't look too close, but look at my own face, the neck is usually in shadow, and then you have the ears that are lighter, and so that just
Hmm.
creates more depth than you would normally have, and that's a good, or like in the hind legs or anything like that. So yeah.
Hmm. I guess that's where like a picture would come in really handy to see where those shadows are and see where, the light
Yeah.
would be hitting something.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
awesome. And I think that's a real crucial part of making something look realistic. You can get the colors right, like on like for one of the Dalmatians that you show in your craftsy
Hmm.
class, you can get those spots just right, but you still have to add that, a little bit
Oh,
of shading
sure.
and
Yeah, I
yeah.
remember the first time I decided to make sushi. I remember going to I don't even think I ate sushi at the time, and I went to the local grocery store and just bought, the cheapest sushi I could, just one of those little containers that,
Uh-huh.
looks like it's been sitting there for a week. But, it's like, you know what? My wasabi looked like real wasabi because I had it in front of me. So, I always say I don't know how cake designers did things before the internet, and I do know because I worked for one, and she had like a file folder of all of her, cakes and designs, and it's kind of like even to this day, I go through magazines and I tear sheet. If I see something that
Hmm.
I love and I'm like, oh, that would make a great cake. I don't wait to just see everything online, but then I may use images to help me get the back or, things like that.
Hmm. Awesome.
Details, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the back part that we
Oh,
were
yeah.
talking about.
What do you
I don't
think?
see a seam. I'm
Well, and
looking.
also, I mean, where the legs go in the front of the chest, if people look at that picture again, that was all seamed
Hmm.
together. So, yeah, I mean, it's really the
Yeah.
Fonderific is just amazing. And also, I do go back in areas sometimes and add, the silicone mat, and then I also add some extra fondant. I mean, the tail was pieced back on. So the ears are pieced on. So, you
Hmm.
can't make it all in one fell swoop. There's no mold.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Not for something that big, for sure.
No.
Yep. All right. Well, this is a really fun project.
And it's
And
fun. The base is actually a technique. I'm sure most of your viewers know inlaid fondant, which is a fun technique, and also just the tiling of it all. And that's being shown. Craftsy's releasing a free video for everyone, so it'll be on YouTube.
woohoo.
Anyone can watch it, and it's all about the basics of fondant. I think it's not out till June. I heard like the
Hmm.
middle of June. People can check out my Facebook page or, the Craftsy website to see when. But it's really cool because I just go through, how to flavor fondant, how to color fondant, how to make a basic rose, really basic stuff. But then we get into, appliques and the silicone molds and also the inlay technique, which is really nice because it looks almost like Spanish tile.
That's really cool. And that's exciting that, something free for everybody to watch.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
great. Awesome. Okay, so on
Oh,
to your recipe.
yeah. Yum.
I was really excited to see this because for me, I don't know, I haven't tried to make brownies very many times, but when I haven't had very much success. And I think, I know all about, technique and the science behind
Sure.
ingredients and all that kind of stuff, but I've just never really taken the time to find a good brownie recipe. So,
Oh, well, I hope you like them. It started out as a recipe from pastry school, and they're definitely more fudgy brownies than
love
cakey.
that.
So just people should be warned. They're awesome with like, brownie, hot fudge sundae. And it's really just about the chocolate. And what I
Hmm.
love about the recipe, it's basically, it's not a one pot recipe, but it's basically, you know, there's not a lot of technique involved. As long as you mix everything together, you're fine. It
Awesome.
could be actually a one pot if you. I have made these where I don't have a mixer, so you know, obviously just soften your butter ahead of time, which you should do anyway when you're baking. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, it's just a great recipe, and they're super rich, and just use good chocolate, you know.
Okay. Do you have a favorite brand?
You know, if I just go to the grocery store, I'll use anything from, you know, Ghirardelli, or Lindt, or you know, something like that. You know, not a fan of like the real basic brand. I always say like
Uh-huh.
look at it. You know, if it looks really light and gray, that's probably not a good chocolate. If it's really dark and rich, then that's
Uh-huh.
and then, you know, for my own purposes in the bakery, obviously we could get wholesale stuff. So I use Cocoa
Mhm.
Berry and Calabo and Valrhona. So, you know, but you can't find that at the regular grocery store.
Yeah, you have to special order that.
But you could use, you know, even Nestle is totally fine. I mean, it's
Mhm.
easier to melt chocolate that's already broken up into chips, or again, we get pistoles. We're very fancy, you know, the French. But anyway, but just any kind of really good quality chocolate chips is good.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, and here is the whole the method of how to do it.
Yeah, and make sure you
So,
use dark brown sugar. That really adds the depth of flavor
ooh,
versus the light brown sugar.
that more, deep
Yeah, but
molasses type of flavor.
again, if you need to make them tonight and the kids are asleep and you can't leave them, and you shouldn't, although I know people do, you can go ahead and use light brown sugar if that's all you have. It'll just give you a
Hmm.
richer flavor, that's all.
Okay, awesome. And we have the rest of it here. For those of you that are really wanting the recipe, I will be posting it on our CakeFu blog later on.
Great.
And yeah, you can find it there also. But there's also the replay that will be available later on for you guys that want to go through and watch this over again. Let's see, and then some tips right here that you can actually freeze the brownies or freeze it before you cut it. I love that tip.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Because otherwise they're so fudgy. So it'll just make your life easy. You know, freeze them overnight, or even just stick them in the fridge, and then take them out. If they're in the fridge, you could take them out, start cutting. If they're in the freezer, let them, you know, warm up for 10 to 15 minutes, and then I usually use a ruler and you know, just a regular chef's knife,
Mhm.
and that's just so I don't run out. But you could just do it by eye. I think I was scarred by pastry school. I got yelled out by a chef because I didn't measure my brownies, which is kind of ironic.
They have to
But
be uniform and perfect.
yeah, exactly. I didn't realize, but I guess when you're serving, you know, at an event, it should be. But I learned the
Yeah,
hard
that's
way.
true.
I'll never forget that.
Oh, that's funny. I guess the benefits of pastry school, right?
Yes, yet another benefit.
All right. Well, we have a whole bunch of questions. I know we won't get to them all, and I apologize ahead of time for that, but we'll get to as many as we can. Um, let's see. Let's find some of these. Sorry, it might take me a second. Let's see. Oh, wow, that's kind of a really broad question. We have
Go
someone
ahead.
ask, yeah, do the best you can. Uh, okay, so a quick answer for this. Where should I start a good cake, or start to be a good cake decorator? I love art.
I
Thank you.
would just pick up some cake decorating books, and you're lucky. I'll say my age by, you know, I didn't have videos to watch when I started, but you know, go onto YouTube. I mean, there's so many websites now.
Mhm.
I would just make sure you get a good one. You know, you don't want to learn from someone who doesn't know, but you know, learning the basics. It's great to either look at books, and if there's a local, class, it could just be a one-time class at, a craft store, a local Y or JCC or something like that, or a local culinary school. Like I know our culinary school, ICE, the Institute of Culinary Education, and also the French Culinary Institute in New York, they sometimes have some just basic cake decorating 101, and then you need to just, I mean, as an artist, it sounds like the person will, be a natural, that maybe they just need help learning how to bake and split a cake. But you can really do so much to teach yourself. I think, the more you could teach yourself at home first, and then use the lessons and the expertise to kind of get you to the next level.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. Okay, so this was a three-part question. I think I'm only going to ask one of them. How far in advance of an order do you bake the cakes for your sculptures and your elaborate designs?
Well, when I was running the bakery and I was doing cakes every week, so it was sort of, our week was Monday through Saturday, sometimes Sunday. Remember, small business owner. So, we would start on Monday, Tuesday, kind of baking the cakes, getting them frozen, making the filling, starting on the sugar decorations. Because there is this fallacy out there that it's not good to freeze your cakes. I agree that you should not freeze your cakes for months or even weeks, but to freeze your cake at the beginning of a week for an order that's ready for Saturday or Friday, it's kind of a necessity, because when you're putting out 10 cakes in a week, like we were doing running the bakery, there's no possible way you can bake them all that day. And honestly, I think that, to put your cake in a refrigerator, it actually draws out the moisture and kind of dries out your cake. Whereas if you wrap your cakes well and freeze them, then the flavor actually has time to mature. So whether, it's our banana cake or our chocolate cake, I think the flavor comes out better day 2 and 3.
I agree with that, actually. I think that it's so some people are so I don't know if it's things that they've read. I don't know if it's things that they've read about, things being fresh.
It's crazy. Yeah, I've had, brides that have come to me and think like we bake, split, fill, decorate their wedding cake the day that they get married. I want to say, how would we possibly do that? There's no possible way. We would be selling 1 cake per day, if that. I don't even know that you could get a 6-tier wedding cake done, But I think unfortunately there are a lot of bad bakeries and bad cake designers, and so if you've tasted a frozen burn cake, it's the worst thing in the world. At least to me it is. And so people are afraid of that, but I'm not a bakery that bakes my cakes once a year. I'm just saying at the beginning of the week, sometimes 2 weeks, you can do it. And it also depends on the cake, how much fat is in it, if it's oil versus butter. I mean, there are a lot of intricacies to it.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. We have someone asking about the type of cake. So what's the perfect cake for sculpting, she asked. And then also she asked about buttercream for a warm, hot climate. Well,
for the cake, I use a whole bunch of cakes. I mean, I have vanilla, chocolate, banana, red velvet, carrot. I think, when you sculpt cake, you want to make sure that it's a fairly firm cake when it's frozen, so that it holds its shape and that it's not something, one of my early on, before I had a business, I made a cake out of my carrot cake recipe, which is now changed, but it had, pineapple juice and raisins and shredded carrot, chunky stuff, not good to sculpt cakes out of. So if you're doing something like an apple spice cake, you just want to make sure you dice up your apples really well, or your banana. You don't want chunks of things sticking out, and you don't want a cake to break. So, my cakes, I would still say, are delicious and moist, but I would say they have a tighter crumb. So it's much better to do that with sculpted cake than, for example, using a cake mix, which I'm not against at all. And now that I'm a mom, I'm really not against them. I couldn't do it because of what I do, but I do it, when I'm with my family on a vacation. We make, mixed stuff all the time. But those kinds of cakes are so spongy that I'm afraid they would break if trying to carve it. And then in terms of the buttercream, you shouldn't be building your cake in hot weather. So, I've had a lot of students from Costa Rica, and hey, I live in New York City. Nothing's more humid in August than this island. But, so using a ganache is always a good idea. And then just always work, if you can, get an air conditioner, get a fan. Don't build your cake in hot weather.
Yeah, I think that's a key to making sure that, and if it starts to get soft, throw it in the fridge or in the freezer.
Just constantly, if you're working from home, just clear out your fridge and make room for your cake.
And if you're taking it to an event where they want it outside, tell them either just no, or if they do, say, look, I'm not responsible for what happens if you leave this out in the sun.
Exactly. I mean, one of my famous stories is I did a Victorian house cake. It was banana cake with chocolate buttercream in August, complete replica of the Victorian house down to the paint chips. And a week before, the mother told me it was going to be in a tent without air conditioning. And I said, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's just increased. So I made her switch from chocolate buttercream to chocolate ganache to make it more stable. And we sent it in a refrigerated van, and the van sat there until the start of the party. So it wasn't, the cake wasn't sitting out for hours before they started the wedding. And, people really have to understand. I've seen, decorations slide down the side of buttercream cakes. So, there are a lot of bakeries here who will not do buttercream wedding cakes in, the months of June, July, August. It's just too risky.
Yeah. Okay, we have someone that asks about, this is a really good question for someone that's a beginner. They're wondering what kind of cake sculpture is a good one to start on. Is this one that they could do as a beginner?
I would say this has a lot of piecing, like separate pieces, and the head and the body. So I would say a beginner could do it, although I would probably say to start with something that's like probably more square. So something more like a handbag or a doctor's bag or a gym bag or, even a backpack, something that's really stable and not on an angle. And then I would say maybe do the dog after. So I would start with a handbag and a smaller cake, just to familiarize yourself with all the steps and stages. And then, as you go on, because the dog is a little slanted, it has a little bit more intricate doweling than, just a typical cake. And so, I would always start with just a round cake, a square cake, and then get into a sculpted cake, maybe even like a basketball or tennis ball, soccer ball, something round, and then you could get into a more elevated sculpted cake.
Okay, so I think we can only take one more question. We are running out of time here, and we don't want to keep you too long, Elisa. So,
okay, I'm here.
All right, let's try and find a really good one. Sorry. Okay, so. Sorry, we're going to be. Okay, here's an interesting one. Are there art classes that you would recommend to help develop my personal cake designs?
Yes, I mean, I started by saying early on I took a color class, which I thought was amazing. Just anything you do in life, whether it's decorating your house or choosing a car or making cakes, color theory is just amazing. The relationship of color, you'll never look at color the same, and values like we were talking about with the dog. And then the other thing I would just say is drawing. People get so scared, and especially if you think you're going to do cakes, whether it's for your family or for clients, you know, a lot of clients want to see a sketch, and it's a really good way as a professional to kind of protect yourself, because if someone says, I want you to make my boat, and someone else is thinking, oh, she's making my boat, but if you guys have a totally different boat in mind, or so, you know, it's just really good. I usually send my clients a sketch. Sometimes cakes are much more abstract, you know, like I want a ring of daisies on my square cake. You know, a square cake that's 4 inches high looks very different than a square cake that's 2 inches high, and you know, the width and stuff. So drawing and sketching is a great tool to have, really, whatever you're doing in life.
Awesome. So find some art classes that, yeah, that, I mean, really, I think that any class you take would be
really
helpful.
any, yeah. Oh, it's, you know, you could take a paper making class, and I mean, walking in the streets, like I always say, you know, architecture and fabrics, and you know, I mean, you can really, doing anything is going to help your cakes. But for specific classes, I think, you know, drawing is probably better than painting. But yet, if you're an amazing artist and you know how to draw, but you're not good at relationships with color, then painting could be good for you. You know, especially painting with gels, if you want to explore that more. Or I just took, like about a few weeks ago, I took a polymer clay workshop, because my mom was hosting it at her house, and I didn't even know, you know, I knew what Fimo dough was, but I didn't even know about caning and all this stuff. I loved it. It was just like working with fondant and gum sugar doughs. You know, my mom was very impressed. I had perfect checkerboard design. So anyway, so, you know, clay, pottery. If you're not sure about sculpting, then take a sculpture class.
That's the end. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, for being a part of everything, and we will see you all next week.
Great.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.